So this is the fourth and final section of our unit entitled Revolutions in Russia and Asia. This one is entitled Nationalism in India and Southwest Asia. Southwest Asia is kind of a term we don't use that often. We usually say the Middle East, but Middle East is technically Southwest Asia. So two terms are interchangeable. All right, let's look at India. India was a colony of the British government for a long time, since the 1880s. And after World War I, the independence movement picks up speed. So just put some stuff in perspective here. This isn't a vocab term, but these are laws that were passed that sort of tried to silence independent movements that were going on in India after World War I. All right, another incident that just stirred up frustration, like all the other places we've been looking at, was this Amritsar massacre, where, like what happened in Russia, British soldiers fired on a peaceful protesting crowd of people in the city of Amritsar, which led to discontent and frustration and just a general feeling against the British being in India. All right, the individual that was kind of the face of the rebellion movement was this guy named Mahatma Gandhi, or Mohandas Gandhi, and he's given the title eventually of Mahatma. So number one, Mahatma is the term, which means great soul. And the person, his actual name is Mohandas Gandhi. So if you look at vocab word number 2, what we're going to write for that, Indian national who advocated peaceful protest against the British. So he suggested, rather than picking up guns and attacking the British, going to war with the British, is to very calmly and peacefully protest laws the British were doing that they felt were unfair, and call attention globally to what the British were doing, to the Indian people's cause. All right, and vocab word number 3, civil disobedience. This is the type of protest that Gandhi famously advocated, which is essentially another way of saying non-violent protest. This was done a lot in the United States during the 1960s, during the civil rights movement. Actually was modeled after India's movement under Gandhi, this nonviolent protest. All right, so question 2, what product did Gandhi encourage Indians to boycott the purchase of? All right, so that salt is the product. They were forced to buy it from the British at the British prices, and so this is one area of protest that Gandhi focused on. We can stop buying British salt and hurt them financially, and then maybe they'll start listening to us. So that was one. So the product was salt, and Gandhi organized a march on a salt packing plant as a form of protest, and that worked out to support the cause of independence because the British chose to beat back these protesters with metal clubs. So they didn't shoot them, but they did beat unarmed people back with pretty severe weapons. And how this became a major issue was that at this event, there just happened to be a reporter from the United States there who saw it, went back home, wrote this story, and then it became an international issue. The British are beating Indian people who are just trying to stand up for independence. And this became like a black eye, no pun intended, to Britain, or I guess ironically to Britain. And that caused other nations to put pressure on Britain to grant India their independence. So this is where that nonviolent protest holds its significance, is when others see they're more sympathetic to the cause of someone being exploited than they are someone who picks up a gun and starts violence. And I think Gandhi understood that. All right, another area where independence came was in, okay, I'm going to take that vocab word out, was in the area of the Middle East. So there's different sections here after World War I. If you remember our Versailles simulation, some of the areas that you discussed were mandates in the Middle East, particularly if you were Great Britain. You remember you got that really nice bonus if you were able to convince the other two to support mandates in the Middle East. So some things happened in these mandates after World War I. Let's look at Turkey first. So Turkey, this is just some background here, invaded by Greece, backed by Britain. Turkish nationalists rejected the invasion, overthrew the Sultan. And then after World War One, where we are, is a bit grainy, so if you squint your eyes, it'll look a little bit better. But this individual helped the Turkish people rise up against the Ottomans, overthrow the last sultan, and then establish an independent nation of Turkey for the first time. So his name is Kemal Ataturk, and he's the individual who led this movement. He is given the title. We're going to skip 5 for just a second and go on to 6. The title he was given is Ataturk. So he's called Kemal Ataturk, father of the Turks. All right, and so these are 2 changes that Kemal brought to Turkey. Turkey. So it gave women the right to vote and hold office, and helped industrialize Turkey to make it a more modern nation. Especially if they're going to be independent of a larger empire, they got to have their own industry. That's why today Turkey is kind of it's kind of a controversial place, depending on who you talk to. But so there's still some corrupt leadership. Some people would tell you that there's corrupt leadership, but it's more democratic, and it's not based off of Islamic fundamentalism. It's more of a democratic nation, or it's built on written laws and things like that. All right, the other 2 changes separated the Islamic law from the political law, like I mentioned, removed religion from the courts, and made the culture and the dress and stuff a little more Western as opposed to Middle Eastern and Islamic that they had been tied to when they were part of the Ottoman Empire. So Turkey, throughout the Cold War anyway, after World War II, Turkey is an ally to the United States, a government that's a lot more democratic. The United States puts missiles in Turkey, and that ties into the Cuban Missile Crisis. But anyway, that all happened after World War I, where Turkey became an independent nation. All right, other parts of the Middle East had similar stories, but slightly different. This is an individual who helped bring independence to Persia and release them from British control after World War I, Reza Shah Pahlavi. And he brought independence to Persia. It was a constitutional monarchy, kind of like the British government is. Once they became independent of Britain, they stopped calling themselves Persia and became known as Iran. And then in another Middle Eastern nation, this individual helped them rise up against the British, Abd al-Aziz ibn Saud, and you can probably figure out what nation based on the name that he helped liberate. So this nation, though, set up a government based on Islamic laws, and they renamed their country Saudi Arabia. And just like it is today, the laws are closely tied in with Islam.